Welcome to the Association 100 podcast. The A100 podcast is an extension of our Association 100 bi-monthly newsletter that focuses on best practices, top trends, helpful ideas, and smart strategies and tactics that work in the world of associations. The podcast will feature meaningful conversations with association professionals across the country, taking a deeper dive into trending topics, offering insights that both inform and inspire.
Welcome back to another episode of the A100 podcast. I'm your host, Colin Gallagher, and I'm really excited for today's conversation with Ben Rome, the Director of Communications for the American Bus Association. With close to 30 years immersed in storytelling and strategic communication, Ben serves as ABA's Director of Communications, culminating in his rich professional journey spanning diverse roles since 2009. His expertise encompasses a multifaceted skill set from writing and editing to podcasting, game design, content marketing, and beyond. This broad proficiency has earned Ben an impressive collection of over 25 awards in communications, content marketing, publications, and game design. A passionate storyteller, his zeal lies in crafting captivating narratives that resonate with varied audiences. His trajectory to Washington, D.C. traces from Orlando to Chicago, Pittsburgh, and eventually the Northern Virginia locale he affectionately calls home. I'm also a Northern Virginia resident here, so love that. Ben's literary prowess is evident from his precocious start. I love this, having his work featured in a school newsletter at just 6 years old. That's amazing. To becoming a published author of over 70 books and materials. Talk about knowing what you want early. Beyond the written word, Ben's adventurous spirit finds expression in global explorations with his wife of nearly 3 decades. Back home, he remains a devoted fan of the Pittsburgh Penguins and an avid consumer of cutting-edge science fiction. His multifaceted persona seamlessly weaves creativity, strategic acumen, and a zest for travel into a captivating narrative that continues to inspire. Ben, thanks so much for joining us on the A100 today.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to be joining.
Great. And I know we interviewed you back at ASAE for an article last summer. So we're pumped to have you back and to be able to dive a little deeper into your expertise on the podcast here today. So tell me, with your experience in storytelling and strategic comms, how are you seeing the role of storytelling evolve in the association world? And what are some of those key elements that make a story compelling and engaging for your membership?
It's a good two-part question that kind of connects and doesn't. So I've been in the association space in 2009. So back when I first entered, a lot of association marketing was more about the hype and the slogans and the cool stats. It wasn't anything like threaded together. And I often joke with some of my peers that associations are usually about 10 to 15 years behind trend. I will say the gap has shortened a little bit, but I still feel that there's a more cautious approach in the association space. So they watch to see what happens to the corporate side, and then what works there, they jump on, even though it may not work in the association. They tend to go with more risk averse strategy than they do risk forward. And that's not a bad thing, but because of that, you're just now seeing a lot of good messaging that's coming out through his storytelling. So back when I started the marketing and even the content, there was no resonance to it. And so people are, what does it mean by that? So think back to TV shows that you've seen, not movies, TV shows that you've seen over the last 20 years. Which series stands out to you? And I'm betting at least half of them involve really great storytelling arcs that touch something personal to you. That's resonant. You still remember fondly sitting down and watching a series, Person of Interest or Burn Notice or Monk, or even comedies like 70s Show or whatever. They stand out because they resonate. And that's what good storytelling does. And now I'm beginning to see that in associations, what they're doing with Tom. And it can be any size. You don't have to have a multi-person team in order to do this. You're starting to see really good messaging. The second part of your question is what makes a story compelling and engaging. I think I just hit on it. It's connecting everything together. It's making it resonate with the audience that you're trying to hit. Why should they care? And it's not just about why should they care. It's also about the sticking power that you're making by creating these messages that resonate long past the campaign. So they hear or see something that reminds them of what you talked about a year or 2 years ago. You're not even running that campaign anymore. You're not even talking about it, but they remember that because it's tied to something that you made a profound statement or your association did something so unique and it was pushed out there that they remember that. And that's what they key back. It's partially the brand recognition, but it's basically brand recognition from the 50s and 60s turned up to 1,000. And then that's where you go. As a sidebar, my wife and I have been watching the Food That Made the Nation or the History Channel series. They've been doing a lot of these different aspects of culture and watching the food one is very fascinating because it's all built on brand recognition and audience manipulation, like psychology of the consumer. And they think it's devious, but at the same time, yeah, it worked. They do these things, they're relying on these things or how they pattern themselves or do something here or there. And they key on that and then move into it. And that's how their brand sticks out. Now we're in this space where storytelling is the king. It's the rage. And it's the rage because it's fueled out of our entertainment. From the 80s and 90s, we started getting TV shows that had long arcs that made you want to sit in and watch not just the issue of the mystery of the day or the action item of the day, but there was also something tying it all together so that you felt like there's a sense of movement throughout the show. And then boom, there it is at the end. And it's a huge gratifying payoff. Now we're seeing that in marketing and content management. You're seeing that now. And that's why storytelling is so king right now, because it's pretty much in everything. You look at recipe websites, they tell the long story. The joke is they tell the long story and it's like, get to the recipe. It's always the bottom of the thing. It's how much is too much and how much is too little. It's in everything. And so that's what drives us. That's what drives us as humans. That personal connection, that resonant is ultimately what stories do. And that's where great story lies. So going back to, and I know I'm making this long, going back to what's compelling and engaging, how are you resonating with the audience? In what way are you telling them to make them remember you or your message weeks, months, years out?
Yeah, we're always hearing storytelling now. I feel like anywhere you turn when you're looking at best practice for communications, it's storytelling. But I so appreciate your long answer because I think that's one of the best actual descriptions of how to make it compelling and how it has changed and evolved. Because I think you're really right about associations. You've really seen in the last 5 years or so them buying in to, we need to tell the story of our industry. We need to tell the story of what we're doing to our members, different pieces like that. They've made a huge strides in their efforts there, and it's definitely showing.
So here's an appendix to that then. When you're doing that, you're making it stick with the audience. It makes them want to find out more. They either dive more into your mission, they dive more into your vision, they dive more into what you're doing. And if you're approaching this from a stance of being inauthentic, basically glossing over the details or misrepresenting your story just to get the quick sale or the quick membership, you're going to lose because the audience can recognize the inauthentic. And when they recognize the inauthentic, previously it was just, I'll take my dollars elsewhere. Now with social media out there, the inauthentic is now called out. And now you're no longer in charge of your own story. Social media is making your story for you. And coming back from that is exceptionally hard because you have no control over it. So if you are inauthentic in your messaging, the audience then becomes the controller and you basically lose. You lose.
Man, that's so true. And it's funny you bring up authenticity because I wanted to shift gears and talk about sustainability next. And that's somewhere where, wow, do people care about authenticity and being real and following up on what you say, not just saying it to check a box. And so obviously it's been a growing focus for a long time for a lot of industries, and transportation is no different. Can you talk to me about how ABA is addressing sustainability and how you as a communicator are able to convey these initiatives to your members and to the broader public that you want to know about it too?
Yeah. So I'm going to make a disclaimer. I've been here 6 months, so I'm not fully immersed in all the different aspects of the deep parts of the industry that I know that our members are. So if any of our members are out there listening, please feel free to write me, how to get a hold of me if you need to correct anything. But anyway, right after I started, we had an update to a research that was done in 2019 that was about eco-friendliness of motor coach transportation. Basically, it shows that motor coaches are the best eco-friendly form of group transportation when compared to all other types of people transportation in the term of energy efficiency per person per mile. So by using a motor coach, anywhere between 10 and 56 people on the coach, represents the most efficient use of energy to transport them from one destination to the other per mile compared to any other type of group transport. And I think we threw single driver cars in there as well. But so van pools, light rail, commuter train, cross country train, ferry, all, electric vehicles, all that stuff. Motor coaches still are a huge eco-friendly benefit to the environment. So it seems odd that would be the case, right? Because everyone thinks big commercial vehicle, big bus, diesel issue, lots of
Right.
smoke, blah, blah, blah. So when the research came out, I partnered with a creative agency I knew out of Colorado, and they did up some great looking infographics and social media card for us. Told the story really well. Very quickly, you could see at a glance just how energy efficient, eco-friendly that motor coach was compared to all these other methods of transportation. So we debuted these graphics and social cards on Earth Day, and our members went bonkers. They thought it was the best thing since the wheel. I don't know. And within the industry, both the group, the tour side, as well as obviously the bus side, with mini viral. They were sharing it back and forth. They were really touting the fact that motor coaches were eco-friendly. We had a big press release push, all our trades, and then a lot of regional and political reporters got wind of it. They would mention it in some of the things that was being done as ancillary things where we talk about EPA emission law. And the thing is that what's interesting is that this was 3 or 4 months ago. I'm still seeing residual engagement on social this far out.
That's
You
amazing.
don't get that.
Oh,
So I'm putting together a more comprehensive campaign ever when there's World Ozone Day. We're going to try to get up a little bit more of a task force with some of our manufacturers and cut that information out. But it was really cool. It was really cool to see. And it's just finding a way to communicate that information in a way that the public kind of grabbed on it. So the other thing that we found in promoting this through the press and social is that when we did some advocacy mentions regarding other things like regulatory things that came out, like the EPA had a couple of regulatory controls on emission and some other things. When we sent out our media alerts and press releases, we would refer back to that research that we did that supports motor coaches as a viable, eco-friendly form of transport. And those agencies, because we had sent those pitches out to them before, even though they didn't grab onto them then, they were grabbing onto it now because it related to this larger story that they were doing. So even then, we were seeing some traction on that research report. Research reports like that, we want to continue putting out because it's positive news about an industry that has not necessarily a negative stereotype, but when you're sitting in traffic and you look at a bus and it's blowing belch out, it doesn't matter if the general public doesn't care if it's a transit bus or a motor coach tour bus. It's really not that much different. But the main thing is big bus, smoke, it's bad for the environment. So this kind of helps challenge that a little bit. The other thing that we're also in advocacy is the whole electric vehicle movement, which our people are behind very much, but we're not against it. It's the speed and rapidity that they want conversion. That's very expensive. And if you think about if you drive your Tesla or you drive your other brand name electric car, there are chargers out there at stations and you plot your trip based on those chargers, right? Those chargers can only handle residential passenger vehicle. It cannot handle commercial vehicles, not the big ones. So there is no infrastructure network for big HD heavy duty commercial vehicle, not in the sense that you see all these supercharged stations out there. So you're talking about not just converting into an electric bus, which is great for transit because you have the station in the city, it can go and charge up. But if you're talking New York to, I don't know, Illinois, that's a longer trip than one charge is going to make. And when you have a large vehicle like that, it sucks up a lot of energy. People are using the TVs, they're using the air conditioning, full blast. You got a full electronic speed on time, Wi-Fi, all that stuff uses electricity, drains the battery. You need to have places that can supercharge commercial vehicles because you don't want to be riding in a bus where normally it would take 8 hours to go from New York to, I think it's more like 12, New York to Chicago. You don't want to double that time because you have to sit at a charging station twice for 4 hours for the bus to fill up again. So we are advocating with our manufacturer members for new technology, which we look to Europe because they're ahead of the game on that, new battery types, new superchargers, supercharging stations, which that then translates into intermodal capacity. These are big sites. Maryland's putting out in a new electrified station, huge. It's built for commercial vehicles. I think for buses, we need to look at it. What does it look like? Footprint look like? Does that impact intercity travel? So on and so on. And these are all things that I'm learning. And obviously, there's probably some misstatements and whatnot that are in there. But by and large, it just means that the whole essence of this is the one thing you might be doing here travels through, like good storytelling, travels through a bunch of different things as well. And that you can use as a touch point. And these other pieces, electrified vehicles and EPA regulations, we can immediately walk them back to that research that we've used to prove our point that we already have a eco-friendly form of travel that works for now. Obviously not 20 years from now and technology changes for modes of transportation, but then you go backwards, that fills in the storytelling gap. What's the overarching arc? What is the staying true to your value? You can see that thread running through all of our things. So it's just a matter of all that stuff tying together. And advocacy is a huge way to tell that story because you've got a solid piece of information that you want to stay, that's your bedrock piece. And then everything you're doing is building off of that. And when you're referring the press back to those initial things, they grab onto it. And then you start seeing traction on all that stuff for a longer period. So I'm going to shut up now because I talked way too much about it.
No, that was great. And I go back to what you said about the member reaction. That's when you know you've done it. When they're excited, they're engaging, and they're the ones sharing and advocating on your behalf. That's when you know, I've got this right in the association comms world. So I love hearing that. And it's interesting you bring up that example with advocacy efforts and trying to tell that story about the EV piece of things. We work with an association called Truckload Carriers Association. I think you guys might be part of a similar coalition there in Clean Freight
Yes,
Coalition.
we are. Yep, that's right.
And they have a very similar stance in that we are all for electrification. They're not trying to stop it. They're just trying to help the public, help lawmakers understand the difficulties and the speed of which it's trying to be pushed along, that the infrastructure just isn't there. And so again, we talk about storytelling. If you're going to communicate, whether it's lawmakers, the general public on the advocacy front, if you can't tell a story that helps people actually grasp what it means, and when you talk about that bus ride from New York to Chicago and all of a sudden hearing that would be double that hits home and people get that. Whereas if you just say something that the infrastructure is not in place, that just makes people think, work harder, get the infrastructure in place.
Because then it comes back to cost. Who's paying for it? Does the public want to pay for that? Is that something that's going to be a political football at this point? So there's all these things that if you don't say anything about it, then it comes back to the baseline perspective of the person. Oh, save the planet, good. Diesel, bad. So that's where they go. And if you don't give them any context at all to make a more nuanced decision, you're not doing your members any justice. You're not doing them any good.
Yeah.
You got to do them right.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. I want to talk about choosing the right channels too. And I think with your vast experience, you could probably have some really good opinions and takes here. So how do you go about deciding what are the right types of channels for getting different messages to the audiences you need to reach?
Yeah. So that was one of the first things that I knew I tasked myself with coming in. And then also talking with the leadership, the association, they agreed with me. And they've also provided some good insight too. And the board was actually really helpful as well. But coming into a completely new industry is out of the years in occupational health, in the health side of industry. And that's a way different industry and audience. How you message to them, how you interact with them, how you get them to engage and that kind of stuff is all very different. And every channel has its nuance. 6 months in, I'm still sorting out what channels to use or where, but I've got a good general sense which side of our members are using what. And I've then begun to ABC test things with them. So I'll give you a really rough example. So we have two industries that they're integrated, but yet separate. So the bus, motor coach, charter side, it can be very technical. Obviously, you've got manufacturers and suppliers, you've got operators, drivers, the dispatchers, intermodal. You've got all types of different ways that charters are used, from group tours to line service to contracted public transit to school bus. And then you've got the group tour side, which is rent a bus for hire for an event. or a sequence of events, or you've got visitor bureaus who contract buses for group tours and things like that. So I use very broadly the bus and the tour, the bus audience and the tour audience. Some of these people mix and some don't, but I have two general audiences. So now it's okay. I understand that now. So where am I going from there? I look at the small number of channels that we use. We don't use a lot of social media channels, partially because some of them just don't lend themselves to communicating to them. And then the one Twitter, former X, whatever, is falling out of use because of the way it's being overrun by the algorithm and the pay for play and all. We have three main channels. We have Facebook, Insta, and LinkedIn. And then we obviously have the website, and we have other things too, but that's not necessarily social. So there are three social channels. So I very quickly learned, funny story, my second week of work was our annual conference. So I worked in the office 3 days, and then boom, I was off to Nashville for a whole week to work.
Nothing
which
like
was
jumping
great.
right in.
I know, which actually was really cool because I got to spend time immersed with the members in a space that they all enjoy, because it's a huge party. It's an event that they absolutely love because it helps them build their business for the next. And I got to watch social feed, and I got to get an idea of what they like and don't like. Now, granted, I'm still learning that, but I have a much better grasp now. And I found that all of our bus people really like the professional side of connection. So LinkedIn was a huge thing for them. And then our travel people are a super extrovert, type A, excitable, awesome, fun people. Where do you go for that? That's Insta and Facebook, right? And then you've got your mixed group, which are either bus operators who also have a tour company, or they work well with the tour company, or that they primarily do tour stuff. They mix on both sides. So I've got this really cool Venn diagram of my industry, my members. So now I know, okay, I'm going to target group stuff is going to be more Facebook oriented, and industry is going to be more LinkedIn oriented. And then in the mix of all those, you've got the awards and who's getting what award, who's moving where, and those get all the accolades back. So within that space, within 3 months, I started ABC testing, content testing. So like the same post on the three different channels written slightly differently, which one gets more engagement, and you pour up. Travel, you get a lot more friendly engagement, fun engagement on Facebook. You got, if we highlighted an award or exceptional service or an anniversary of a bus company, and LinkedIn, yeah, huge engagement. Didn't get it on Facebook as much, and vice versa. You're starting to get a handle on who your audience is and where you go from there. So now you're starting to get an idea of what posts work, and you get to figure out what your time frame looks like. You step-by-step thing. And then you ask people when I meet them, where do you like getting all your industry? Trade magazines, social. I, by and large, is usually social. And where do you pay attention to? What app do you have on your phone? What app on there? You use Facebook or LinkedIn more? I use LinkedIn. Oh, okay. So then it's just a matter of figuring that out. But the whole baseline here is listening. You've got to listen to your members. You've got to pay attention to what they're doing. Where are they saying? Where are they going to say it? And then where are they listening to you at? If you have the ability to track your incoming traffic to your website, are you getting social referrals? Where are the referrals going? Is your LinkedIn people going primarily to which posts are they going to? Is your Facebook people going to another part of your website? You can break that stuff down now and figure it out. Yeah, it takes a little bit, especially when you're not familiar with the industry, but paying attention to the social side and just testing things here and there and seeing how things fall out actually works. It just takes time. You've got to be patient.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me for what you just said is the intentionality. It's not just let's post the same thing on every channel all the time. It's really taking the time to test and see where people are and see how they react to what you put in different places and how you write it in different places. It matters so much because we're too far into social media now to still let people and companies get away with taking and copy pasting the exact same post everywhere. Because then why do you want people to follow you everywhere?
And it's also too that engaging with if we post actually we've had some of our members like post, like when our CEO visits their trade show or whatever, they'll post a picture of him. In fact, Pennsylvania Bus Association just gave Peter, or who's retiring this year, gave him a gift, and they posted it on social, and they were like happy to have ABA President CEO Peter Pantuso visiting our association. rather than repost that, I reposted it on one channel, but on another channel on LinkedIn, I was like, thank you so much for honoring our fearless leader. Really. And we just did that instead. The one that got more engagement was that LinkedIn comment rather than the Facebook repost.
Interesting. Yep.
Because we were reposting, you've got to selectively pick how where you're responding and engaging in that way. And I think our follower analytics popped up that week because we got, I think, 2 more in the region in Pennsylvania started following the page because we showed that we were more than just a posting machine. And we try to
Yep.
engage that way as an entity.
I love that. And it shows that you're real and that it's not just a robot there. And it's, speaking of robots, I want to jump topics a little bit here and start talking technology. So obviously you can't get through a conversation anymore without talking about AI and how it's changing things and its role in communications. So I'd love to know what ABA is doing with integrating new technologies like AI, like data analytics, into your comm strategies. How is that playing out? Are you using it to enhance member engagement, operational efficiency? All over the board here. What are your thoughts?
I have many thoughts. And so we don't have an official policy yet because I think we're still trying to feel things out. We're a small staff. So I do all the content, social, website. I do all of that. So it's up to me as to what I want to decide works and doesn't work, and then work out with the leadership and then go from there. I'm still in that phase where finding what tools work. So I do know that analytics are hugely key. That was one of the first things I did was I know a great data analyst contractor. I had her do a deep dive audit of our analytics and our website, gave me a detailed report back, which I, then on board. But that helped me figure out what on the site needs to be revamped, what needs to be fixed, what needs to be addressed. Because that site had been up to this year, had been in existence since 2009. And just instead of revamping it, they just kept adding to it. And while it was a wealth of knowledge, it was also like a closet that you have that you don't really take care of. You don't really organize it every 20 years. So you can imagine all the debris that might still be in there that may not be relevant anymore. We were undergoing a website redesign when I started as well. So it was a great opportunity to clean house a little bit, fix things up. We're still in the process of doing that. Obviously, like I said, one-man shop, we take a piece at a time, but analytics is huge. It really gives you a sense of who's coming from, where are they going, what's most important, and what are they finding interesting. We rolled out a news center where everything's aggregated together, and it's been going great. And the analytics on there, just from 2 months, it's already doubling and tripling what I saw from previous year when it didn't have it.
That's exciting.
And they were putting their blogs in just like this one dinky little space. I mean, that alone right there tells me that reading the analytics is really key. You can't really survive if you're not knowing where people are going and what's being read and what's being done. As far as AI goes, so I love and I hate AI. As a writer, as a professional writer for a long time, AI is an affront to my writerly senses. And I know artists and creatives are all up in arms about it. But to be honest with you, I have a little bit more of a love-hate relationship with it. One, I don't think it should be used to create stuff whole cloths without oversight or double checking, triple checking. A, what data is it using to create all of that? What's it scraping to find that? And B, people who just do that to throw out garbage just to make a dollar, really same as self-publishing. It's not cool. And especially if you're ripping off people whose work is there, you're not paying them for that creative aspect. But what I do find with AI, and I've talked with a few different peers and some others in content marketing and creation, what AI is really good for is it helps jumpstart that creative process. So for me, typically, because I have journalistic roots a bit, it takes me a while to formulate what a connective piece would be. What's the tissue? What's the point that I'm trying to, here's all the things that here's all the notes that I took. So what's my underlying thread? It takes a while to create that process. And then you're going through the steps of creating a draft and then another draft. And then it's finally in a space where you get it approved and so on and so forth. And that part is always time consuming. I do like it, especially as a creative writer. It would never change that because that's part of the process. But when you are a one-person shop in a trade association that is rebounding from COVID and has demands on time across the board, you need to find efficient workflows, not shortcut, not backdoor secrets, just efficient workflows to help with your efficiency to get to the next thing so that you can continue to communicate with your audience. So I use ChatGPT in that sense of, here's all my notes. What's the underlying theme here? Help me like save an hour of my time by jumping to that point. And then I know what I heard. I know what I wrote down. And if I look at that and I don't agree with what it gave me, I'll ask for a redo until I know it feels right to what I have. So I'm shepherding the process along. I'm just using the tool that helps me fast organize better my points. And then I can start seeing things. And then a corrective here, a corrective there. And then you can always use AI in that sense of, after you finish a piece, you put it in there and ask it for a summary. Does it match with what you were trying to do? Did it pick something up that you didn't realize was there that maybe is an even more interesting highlight? Or is it coming out with crap that you just realized you're not putting together anything worthwhile or substantial? In that sense, AI is a great tool and assistant, and I like it for that aspect. It also is great for figuring out titles. I love doing titles, but in a fictional sense. Doing titles for journal without making it sound like every other service out there, they all have this same, it's like they open a thesaurus and say, okay, recognizes, what's a synonym for that? And that's what they put in there. It's identical in every other way to every other news article. I at least, okay, give me 3 alternate titles for this. Now, the one thing I will fault GPT for is it loves to do this, the subtitle. It loves to give you the 3-word head,
always,
colon, and then
even if you tell it not to.
Even if you tell it not to. So sometimes it'll give great subtitling that uses the title, but like I said, it's a tool. If you're copying and pasting it, putting it up with no oversight and no directional, shame on you. Use it responsibly. It's like everything else. You use it responsibly, it's a great add-on benefit. And for me, it's an efficiency tool. If you're not using it responsibly, you get what's going to come to you. Legal challenges and everything else that come with it. And as far as other use for AI, so obviously primarily this is writing, but I also do a lot of content generation through video, photo, and whatnot. AI in that sense is also great. And you mentioned pre-show that you have the AI assistant that pulls out the ums and all of that from the conversations and makes the person sound smarter, which I appreciate. But that's great because it's so tedious. And everyone who's worked on a sound timeline knows exactly how tedious that looking at those waveforms can be and figuring out what needs to be pulled. But again, it's a way to be efficient. It's an efficiency tool. It's not meant to be a replacement. And I do not like that application. People who are using it as a replacement, it has no business being in that space. But as an efficiency tool, it's awesome. And I love using it in that way.
I love your take on this. By the time this airs, we'll have just finished a 3-part series where we're focusing on uses of AI for PR. So less just content, but more actually, how are we refining our pitches? How are we finding reporters? All of that. And so much of what you just said is just spot on with what we're looking at too. It's AI can get you to a certain point. It can be so great at generating those thought starters and giving you ideas. But if you're not doing your own research, if you're not putting your own voice to it and putting your own touch to it, it's just not, people can see right through that. And it's just so fake. I think that's great. And to your point about not having a policy yet, you're not alone. I ran a ASAE communications council and our subcommittee did a survey and we asked how many associations have policies in place, and it's almost none at this point. It's so new. I think associations are still figuring it out, and especially small staff associations.
5 years, it'll take 5 years before it become a thing. I'm telling you.
Yep, usually does. Awesome. Crystal ball time. So we've talked about AI, so some of this might be the same to what we just talked about, but what are you seeing when we look ahead as some of those major trends for association comms?
Obvious answers video. That's the thing that everyone gravitates to because you like seeing. It's more, video is, I think, the all-consuming answer because that's the most integrated we get with immersing with the subject speaker. So if immersion is the way to best communicate, where you get to see, sight, sound, all that stuff, what's the next one there? VR. AR and VR is the next one up. I don't know how that's going to be integrated, but I'm watching like the Google Lens from 10 years ago. And I think I just saw there's a new camera frame being made that's supposed to integrate AI. I don't know how that's going to work, but, and me being a science fiction writer and that kind of stuff, thinking through of like integration to make things more efficient, faster, figuring out if somebody, say you're in a dinner party and somebody's talking to you about some type of advocacy or latest law ruling from the Supreme Court about one thing, that you can immediately pull up the information instead of pulling out your phone and just side scrolling it and then understanding it. Boom, you're off. Communication wise, the more immersive, the more better at communicating I think it is. And so as you see technology that allows that immersion process to continue to unfold the consumer is where you're going to see more communication effort. So like I said, video is the thing now, but it's been the thing for the last 10 years. But that's the closest we get. So as technology continues to refine itself into other avenues of an immersive communication, then that's going to be the next thing.
Yep. Love that. Ben, this has been amazing, and I appreciate all your insights. Before we let you go here, though, we like to end all our podcasts with a quick lightning round so that people can get to know a bit more about you besides the association personas.
Sure.
First one's easy. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in 4 different cities. So Orlando until I was in high school, Chicago through college, Pittsburgh from when I started adulting in real life up until the 2000s, and then DC. So 4 cities, Orlando, Chicago, Pittsburgh.
What's your Starbucks order or your go-to morning drink routine if you don't do Starbucks?
So whatever coffee's in the fridge goes into my cup. But if I go to Starbucks or somewhere, it's usually a flat white or equivalent of, or barring that, something I call a ghetto latte, which is basically half milk and half hot coffee.
Too funny. All right. If you won the lottery tomorrow, would you still work?
Yes.
What's the last TV show that you binge watched?
Resonant alien.
What's a food you can't live without?
Fried chicken.
And finally, your bucket list travel destination.
So I've knocked 3 of them off already, but I think the next one is either Mount Fuji in Japan or Antarctica.
Both of those would be very cool. Awesome. Again, Ben, thank you so much for your time and insights and talking with us on the A100 today.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And that's a wrap on today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Association 100 podcast, brought to you by the A100 publishing team, powered by Onward and Upward Marketing and Communications. You can subscribe to the Association 100 podcast on Spotify so you'll never miss out, or listen via our website at theassociation100.com. Follow us for all the latest insights and trends impacting the world of associations. Thanks for tuning in.